continue on, and we're standing here, as you can see, just beside the large mound. This is the biggest mound in the Boyne Valley. It's bigger than Newgrange and Knowth, which are the other two principal monuments in the area. This mound here covers 1.5 acres of ground. That's 0.4 of a hectare. And the large stones here beside us, they're called the curbstones. And when the mound was built, 3,000 years BC, there was 127 curbstones placed end to end around the base of the mound. And in the 5,000 years since it was built, only 3 of those stones have gone missing. So I suppose that's quite a good record, really. The reason they have survived so well was because shortly after the mound was built, the soil on top began to slip down, and very soon it would have covered the curbstones completely. So the later groups of people, the Celts, the early Christians, wouldn't have known that the stones were there. They were totally hidden by the soil. So therefore they have survived very well. Now you'll notice that a lot of these stones have carvings on them, and Knowth has the largest collection of neolithic carved stones in Western Europe. There's about 300 carved stones here on the site, and that's 1/3 of the entire collection in Western Europe. Now unfortunately nobody knows what these carvings mean. It's a total mystery to us, and probably always will be. But there are many different theories, and probably the most popular or most generally accepted theory is that the carvings have some kind of astronomical significance. That they might represent the sun, the moon, the stars, different planetary alignments and that kind of thing. And it is quite a plausible theory, because we do know the Neolithic people were very intelligent, and they were very skilled astronomers, and the sun in particular was very important to them. And they probably worshipped the sun as part of their religion, and it certainly played a major role in the alignment and construction of the tombs themselves. So bearing all that in mind, it could go some way towards an understanding for these very unusual carvings. But having said that, it is just one theory, and of course any ideas or theories that you have yourselves are just as valid as anybody else's. So maybe you could start formulating your own theories today as you walk around the site. And we'll just point out one stone here as an example. Sorry, I'm standing here if you don't mind. As an example of the type of artwork on the site. Now this is quite an unusual stone. As you can see, there are 2 semicircles or U-shapes carved on the bottom half of it. There's a line dividing it down the middle. When you look more closely, you notice that these 2 shapes are actually mirrored or reflected on the top half of the stone. You can see it moving around there and there also. So it's actually a symmetrical pattern, and the 2 dots there in the middle also symmetrical on either side of the line. So people would take from that it must have some kind of symbolic meaning. It doesn't seem to be just art for art's sake, although I suppose we could be proved wrong. But most people believe that this particular stone represents the 4 quarters of the moon. So that's just one idea to get the ball rolling for your own imaginations. You'll see plenty more as we go around, but bear in mind that many of the stones are quite weathered, so you do have to look closely in order to see the carvings on many of them. Now before we go any further, if you just have a look over this way, across the fence here, and you're looking into the part of the site which is still being excavated. Now just to tell you a little bit about the excavations here, they began in 1962 and they're still in progress today. So far, just 1/3 of the site has been fully reconstructed, so there's still quite a lot of work to be done. Now the reason it's taking so long is simply because the site has proved to be much bigger and much more complex than they ever imagined. When they began the work back in 1962, they would have had an idea that they would find one passage tomb in the large mound. Newgrange was already known about it, but we always believed that Knowth must be something similar. And 7 years into the excavation, they discovered the western passage tomb. But 2 years later, they found the eastern one. And it was only then they began to realise what a complex and large site Knowth was. And of course they found the 17 small mounds around the large one, and each of those had to be fully excavated. So there was plenty of work to keep them busy, and it will continue for another while yet. You'll have to come back and visit us again in about 10 or 15 years, and hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit more of the site than you can today. But really it's very difficult to say when it will all be finished. We just don't know. And looking over this direction, you can see one tall pillar stone there quite close to the mound. That is the original pillar stone which marks the entrance to the western passage tomb. So just to show you on the plan again, we're standing just about here at the moment. Now the western passage is 34 metres in length, so it's quite long, and at the end of the passage there's a very simple chamber. Now the chamber is roughly square shaped, but really it's just slightly wider and slightly higher than the passage itself, just high enough for an adult to stand upright in, and we call that an undifferentiated passage tomb. Now during the excavations, the archaeologists found a basin stone. They found it halfway down the passage. Now they believe it must have stood originally in the small chamber, but at some point along the line someone must have tried to remove it, and maybe because it was so heavy they didn't get it very far and just dropped it or abandoned it halfway down the passage, and that's where it still lies today. It's the full width of the passage, and if you were to crawl down the passage you would have to crawl over the basin stone in order to get to the chamber. So I'll tell you more about the eastern passage tomb when we move a little bit farther around. Are there any questions before we continue?
Have you rebuilt up the satellite tombs?
Yes, the satellite tombs that you see here are reconstructed. There was nothing really left of them. Well, there were some original stones, so they reconstructed them using whatever original material was there, but unfortunately a lot of the satellites were badly damaged and they had to replace a lot of the stones. Okay, we'll continue down this way.